Hi, my name is Scott Marker, and this is another episode of Treasure Valley NIA Quick Tips. How this came to be is I'm a franchise owner of Network in Action. I've been running over 7 years now. They're out of Houston, Texas. What they are is it's a professional networking group that you build out as a franchise owner, and I have three different groups with a lot of different experts in their fields, people really super knowledgeable about what they do and how they help customers here in the Treasure Valley and beyond. And I like bringing them on the show to kind of share their expertise. And today is a perfect example because the legal profession, ugh, so that's you need an expert or someone that has years of knowledge. So, hey Taylor, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Scott. My name's Taylor Brooks. I am a owner of Brookstone Law and Counsel, PLLC, and my firm is really the guy that tries to keep you out of a lawsuit. So I'm a business attorney. I am, probably most specialized in contracts and all things contract law. I've done a lot of commercial litigation over contracts in the last 6 years. So my expertise is now yielded towards business owners to try and help them beef up their contracts and do better things to keep them out of disputes.
Love it, love it. So here's the next question: is like, what made you think about becoming an attorney? How'd that come to be?
It's probably the most shallow answer that you'll probably get from me in all this thing, but I just wanted a career that was recession proof. So this is the first white collar job I've ever had.
Oh,
I did general contracting and subcontracting work most of my life. I was a Marine for a little while. I ran a welding fabrication business, and in all those things, when the economy gets tough, we felt it as well.
oh, yeah.
Our business was tough as well, and so I reached a crossroads in my life at one point, and my dad said, "Hey, if you're going to go to school and get a job that makes sense, and that you don't have to worry about being too hot or too cold out in the elements, and also something that is going to be recession proof in the economy." And so I chose the law. I started working for a local attorney in my hometown back in New Mexico, and I really just fell in love with the challenge. It's different every day. Every client that comes through the door has a different issue and a different problem that we need to solve. And so that gives it just something, a little different every day.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's I mean that keeps things exciting and not boring.
Yeah. No two disputes, even though they have the same, issues, they're not the same people, not the same stories. So it's
Right.
different.
So so after becoming an attorney, what was like one of the biggest surprises?
Oh, well, probably two things. Number one, the rampant imposter syndrome that goes throughout the practice.
Oh,
We're all just doing our best. We just kind of guess, which is why they call it a practice and not a profession. And I
oh,
never
okay.
really appreciated that until I started doing this on my own, really. And it's a judgment call every day, right? There's no perfect answers. And especially when we're talking about solving things through litigation, I mean, it's just a total gamble. It's kind of a guess. I don't know what judges or juries will do. And so everything is a judgment call. And I think the second thing was how unglamorous it is. They always talk about the legal profession like it's got this air of prestige and it's this glamorous thing, and it's definitely not. Definitely not.
It's the reality of challenges businesses have.
Yeah, I joke all the time with my pastor. I tell him, "You and I have pretty much the same job. I just get paid what it's worth."
Love that. So, so now you have like the TV, social media. So, what we see on that. So, what do you think that gets that wrong? That we see looking at TV and
Oh
the
man.
and the
So in
social
TV,
media.
everything's fast. Nothing's
Oh,
fast in the actual profession, right? Or
oh,
the
okay.
practice. In Suits, I love the fact that Harvey just calls up the judge directly, gets a hearing and a trial the same day, shows up there, just blackmails everybody with some dirt that he's got on him and wins. That would be so easy
Yeah.
if it were like that. And it's really the process. That's what TV and social media and all those things get wrong. Of course, it's TV, and so they've got to make it dramatic. They've got to
Right.
make it quick. People don't have long attention spans. And the truth is, if you actually recorded a live, video of a litigation lawsuit, you'd fall asleep for the first, 17 months. Um, it's just not that
Mm.
glamorous. It's boring, right? It's a lot of
Yeah.
paperwork. It's a lot of looking at the documents. It's a lot of finding evidence and piecing that together to make a case. And very rarely is that dramatic. Most of the time, it's just straightforward. Like, these are the facts. Here's the law,
Yeah.
and here's what it should be.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's always, yeah, yeah. Like a lot of things, TV or the social media makes things look real simple when, especially the law, you know, it's like just not like you said. You have judges that are involved. You have uh, what do you have people,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, imagine trying to explain, the technicalities of an engineering formula to a jury that's got the, you know, average grade level of, like, eighth grade, right? It's just very different, and it's very practical. There's just not a lot of fanciness and prestige that's going to get you in or out of it. That has nothing to do with it, right? We're just advocates for people.
Wow. So, what's so for businesses, what's one issue you think, or individuals, but you're a business attorney too, that's your main focus. But that's one issue that most people ignore that costs them the most money.
Oh, legal structure. Um, a lot of people, they start their LLC, or they start their corporation, and they've got a friend that's a CPA or tax professional, and
Right.
and CPAs and tax professionals give great advice, and they're big on S corps right now. Those are very popular. There's a lot of tax benefits to those, but legal structure is just not something that is ever really focused on. It's very
Oh,
inexpensive to start up an LLC in Idaho. I think it's like $100 if you wait the standard time. It's $150 if you expedite it and get it same day. But most people think, like, okay, I filed a certificate of organization. I've got an LLC. I'm a business. And
right.
that is just not the case. Or they go online, they'll go to Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom, something like that. They'll get themselves an operating agreement for some, cheap subscription price, and they really don't know anything about what the operating agreement does, or what it's supposed to do, or how it could protect them, or and then there's corporate formalities, right? When people neglect their legal structure, or when they don't plan for it, those corporate formalities become also neglected, and they become something that kind of gets put on the back burner. And when a dispute happens, 3 or 4 years down the road, where they get sued, they find out that those corporate formalities are huge, because they get sued personally, or they sue their
Oh,
LLC, and then middle way through the lawsuit, they amend their complaint and try to pierce the corporate veil, and say, well, it's really an alter ego. There's absolutely no formalities with this, right? No separate bank accounts, or they've mixed their personal assets and their business assets. They've commingled expenses. They've never had an annual meeting. All those things that are required to kind of keep that legal shield out in front of you that keeps you from personal liability. So most expensive, it just exposes all their personal assets, which is the opposite of why you have an LLC in the first place.
right. Yeah, that's why you get an LLC is to
Right.
make you protected, your house, your personal things, from someone suing you.
Right. Yeah, that
Wow.
lack of planning up front is probably the most expensive mistake you can make, because it's really inexpensive to do a little bit of planning up front.
And then also, like you mentioned too about going back there about having like an annual meeting. So explain that because I know I bet you many people don't ever do that. They
Yeah,
get themselves a LLC and or even an S corp, and then
right,
they have themselves and a partner, and then what you can't just not do anything, right? Then go, oh, that's
right,
done. What do you got to
right.
do then?
Yeah, so annual meetings, the biggest one that I see that it just never happens is when it's just a single member LLC, right? And it's weird to have a meeting with yourself. And it's weird to do a lot of things, with an LLC. And that's why single member LLCs get into such trouble is because all the corporate formalities require you to sign and kind of paper trail this thing. And it's all just you and you signing
Right,
things,
right,
right? Me, Taylor Brooks, on behalf of Brookstone Law and Counsel, is signing a, document that says I had a meeting, with myself, and here's what we decided to do with the company this year.
right.
Um, and those things aren't necessarily the sticklers, right? Piercing the corporate veil it's an equitable thing and it's a sliding scale, right? All the corporate formalities, some are more important than others. But how your legal structure is even uh, set up, right? An LLC and a corporation, they have different formalities. Corporations are much more formal than limited liability companies, and they have a lot more stringent requirements than LLCs do. And so um, whether those, I mean, in a corporation, for example, the annual meeting is required, right? You're supposed to have a shareholder meeting. You're supposed to discuss how stocks, or shares or whatever the company's doing is going to be distributed. There's decision-making authority in a corporation, and in an LLC, it's pretty flexible. That's really governed by the operating agreement. And so, um, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And then also, I think it's funny we talk about setting things up because um, in the last couple of years, there's been two instances I know of that, and I know both of them too. And um, one person ha set everything up, and the other person was going to be a partner, going to be a partner. And then 2 years in, after building it up to, making a considerable amount of money, the other person just cuts the other person loose because there's nothing in writing, no partnership agreement or nothing.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen that happen a lot.
a lot.
Or verbal like
Yep.
yeah, I'm your partner. Oh, I promise this, I promise that, and there's nothing. They don't go to an attorney getting things written down. So, do you see that type of stuff a lot? I'm sure.
I see it all the time. They've got a napkin deal, they've got a text message exchange, they've got a couple of emails that kind of give a general understanding, right?
Right.
But their bylaws are completely absent of any sort of partnership arrangement. They've got no partnership agreement, they've got no operating agreement that mentions anything. Even their Secretary of State filings, when you fill out the certificate of organization and
Right.
you plug in the governors, those aren't done right.
Oh,
And so it's, you have this person that's basically coming in and saying, no, we agreed to be a partnership, and this company's worth $1 million and I want my 500,000. And, they litigate for several months, and it's a mess. It's very expensive, very difficult to sort that stuff out. And all of it could be obviated with, a little bit of planning up front.
yeah. And then this is something that you made me just think of is because for my groups, whenever somebody wants to come visit, I always, as a business, I always check the Idaho Secretary site to see if they're registered in Idaho.
Right.
And then and why is that important? That they do that?
Well, it's important if they want to do business in Idaho that they're registered in Idaho. It also affects,
Because there's times that they're not. No.
right,
If they're from out of state, I'm not sure why. Sometimes if they're out of state and they're here, they're not registered because they're probably registered in another
right.
state. But I see people that are doing business here themselves, only in Idaho, open up a business and don't register with the state.
Yeah, and it really what it does, in my opinion, what comes forefront to mind is it affects their right to sue or be sued, right? So
Okay.
a company that is doing business in Idaho but that's not registered to do business in Idaho has no legal rights to the court systems of Idaho to
Oh,
redress their, grievances, right? So
right.
if somebody's doing contract work over here and they're not registered to do business here, and somebody stiffs them on that contract and they're not registered, they can't sue uh, to go after that money.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, because I make a point of asking anybody that's not registered why. Because I just had someone the other day that visited the group. He's been in business for 1 month and he's registered and everything. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So he has so which is smart. But yeah.
Right.
Uh, so give like a real example of someone you've worked with that small little steps if they would have went with you could have saved them a huge problem later.
I just went through a case where, and this is a pretty common scenario. It's a homeowner who hires their friend to do work, right?
A
Uh,
contractor?
yeah, and I
Okay.
mean you can put it in any category, right?
Okay. Okay.
But a homeowner, hires their friend to do work, or just a person hires their friend to do work,
Okay.
and they think in their minds, we're friends. We've been friends for 30 years. You're not
Yep.
going to screw me over. Nothing's going to happen, right? Um, and when we're talking money and moral principles, the rubber really meets the road with people, right? Whether
Yep.
whether or
Yep.
not that money is an important thing to them or not. And what always happens is they get into this general understanding, right? So one of my pitches in business is I help general understandings become specific expectations because that's what
Okay.
contracts are about, right?
Okay.
And most disputes happen because general understandings were not communicated as specific expectations. And
Right.
everybody has specific expectations when they're paying money to somebody else, right? If I'm going to
Right.
give you money, I have specific expectations about what that money is getting me. And a lot of times, when you hire your friend and you don't have a contract and you don't talk to an attorney about what your rights are or what should happen or shouldn't happen, what's the best way to structure this deal,
Right.
you have a lot of general understandings that go months and months and months with a lot of money out. And then a dispute arises, and you realize we don't have a contract. We don't have anything
Yep.
in writing. We don't even know, we don't have anything, right? And so they come to me and they say, okay, Taylor, I've hired my friend to do all this work, and here's what the general contract was, or here's what our understandings were. And I say, okay, what was the contract? Well, we didn't have one. And I say, okay, you have text messages that talked about, what you wanted them to do. No,
Yeah.
it was all verbal. Do you have any emails or invoices or any kind of documents that say like what's happened? Well, he's filled out a bunch of invoices and sent them to me, but that's not really the way it worked out. I said, well, in court, that's how it's going to look. It's going to look like that's the way it worked out because those verbal things, it's just going to be kind of a he said, she said.
Right.
And the best way to have addressed that up front is come see somebody like me and say, hey, we need a contract. A very simple thing, right?
Right.
It doesn't have to be 30 pages long. It could, I mean, most of my contracts are between 3 and 7 pages, depending on
Oh,
what's
okay.
going on, right? Um, and it's just carving out, okay, here, what are you going to have them do? What's the general price? Are we going to put it in phases? Is it going to be all up front? And I really just ask questions to help people flesh out their specific expectations so that everybody's on the same page. And sometimes that causes the deal to fall apart and people get mad. But I explain to them, if they can handle it, right? Um, hey, if this deal fell apart because of these questions from me, I saved you from getting into a
Yep.
nasty lawsuit in six
Yep.
months
Yep.
before you paid them, $50,000.
Yeah. No, no, that is great too. Again, it's a little bit of preparation, up front. Someone talking with someone like you can get people out of a lot of trouble. That's one thing that's a recurring theme over the years with the groups I run is talking to um legal. It seems to be legal and kind of accounting and bookkeeping. That's the
Yeah.
two things that businesses just um don't take the time to hire a professional to help them out, and it just causes a mess, either on the
Well, look, and
legal side or on the accounting side. It just causes a
right.
mess.
We're expensive. Nobody wants to pay,
Yeah,
lawyers money, right?
right,
And nobody wants to pay CPAs and bookkeeping professionals on a monthly basis because they think, oh, it's just not that important. I have
right.
other things. I got to get cash flow first. I've got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
structure my client list. I got to nail down my processes first, right? There's always things that are more important to them. And one of the things I try to encourage people to do is listen, having an attorney is a relationship, right? And if you only go to attorneys when problems arise, you're going to pay them 3 times as much to bail you out of those problems than you would if you had a relationship early on, right? And you spent, let's just arbitrary numbers, say $1,000 up front to get some
right,
general understanding, to get an education, to get some contracts, basic things, right? And then if they get an email that's terse or something like that, and they call me and they say, Taylor, I got this email. I know we talked about, contracts and specific expectations, and here's what my contract says, and I think this is going to turn into a dispute. That's 15 minutes for me to
right,
address that, which most of the time I barely charge people for those things. as opposed to, yeah, well, send me the contract. That's a $300 review. Come see me and have a meeting. Let's talk
Yeah.
about, what you guys, I got to get the whole backstory,
Yeah.
right? And so they end up spending more to find out that they're in a pickle, as opposed to what they've done up front is 15 minutes to tell them, oh, here's what you do, and now you're out of it.
Yeah. And see, that was actually one of my questions here is uh, if someone could do, um, yeah. So here's what's a smart legal strategy look like to 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 get keep you out of disputes, keep you out of trouble?
Start with me and do
Okay.
it my way. Uh,
Okay.
and really what it is, Taylor, I want to start a business. What do I need to do? All right, great.
Okay.
Let's talk about what your business does. And then I give them a generalized category of, okay, that's a really risky business, and here's why. Or, wow, that's a great business model. There's virtually no risk to that, right? And I literally had that yesterday. I had a friend say, hey, I want to start a business. I want to do a partnership. What all do we need to do? And I said, well, you should definitely have an operating agreement or a partnership agreement. Irons out, what happens if one of you dies? What happens if one of you, if a dispute happens? How are you going to solve that? Those basic things. And I said, but tell me about the business. Let's talk and see, contracts, are these necessary? What kind of risk are you dealing with? And they're dealing with like a $5 product. And so I said, "Oh man, yeah, you've got like virtually no risk at all. I mean, worst case scenario, just send someone a new product. It's $5. I mean, it,
Right.
that's so low risk, it barely warrants my involvement. But when you start getting purchase orders for those products and somebody wants to order 10,000 units, right? Well, now it matters. And so, we talk about those things and they know when to call me and when not to call me. And that's what I do, right? I'm not here to screw people. I'm here to educate you on when I'm needed and when I'm not. And whether we meet once a quarter, whether we meet once a year, or once a month, right? My job is to keep you out of disputes and to help educate you on when you need me and when you don't.
Yeah, see, and that's one thing I really liked about you when I was one of the first times I talked to you is that you have a lot of years. How many years of I guess I don't know, you do call these disputes? What's it called when you do a
Yeah.
lot of
So my last firm hired me in 2020 with a limited license right out of law school. And then when I
okay,
passed the bar, I've been litigating with them since 2021. So 5 years commercial litigation,
okay.
6 years, practicing law, probably for a firm in a practical sense.
So when you say dispute, give because I know some, but what's it mean? Like people suing each other, and then you get in there
Yeah.
and have to kind of
Yeah, commercial litigation is just lawsuits between companies
okay,
mostly. But we did all kinds of contractual disputes. We did a lot of construction litigation. We did a lot of, I did some employment law stuff. So that's more like internal disputes
okay,
between, an employee and an employer.
okay.
And then real property disputes were generally landowners or homeowners trying to figure out boundaries or trying to figure out easements or, and that's a very complex and interesting area of law. But in all litigation, it's just lawsuits, people suing each other or companies suing each other.
Yeah, and then one thing a lot of people don't understand is another. I mean, super important. The reason you want to try to get you someone like you in place and kind of help you is that you don't want to get into a lawsuit because lawsuits are super expensive.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that people don't know or that people assume coming into the practice that like I'm going to be able to get out of this for a few grand or 10 grand or 20 and the the average cost of a lawsuit is about $100,000.
Wow.
And there's so many variables, Scott. I mean, so many variables when we're talking about litigation. I've had cases that I've solved for 15,000. I've had cases that I've solved for 5,000. I've had cases I've solved for 350,000. You know, it really there's just so many variables.
Right.
And the best thing I tell people is, lawsuits are two things. Their process and their merits. And the merits are often the only thing that's ever talked about. People come into our office and they say, "All right, here's what happened. Here's the dispute. What do we do?" And I tell them, "Well, those are the merits, and those aren't going to matter for about 14 to 18 months from now.
Wow.
What you're going to be facing with this is process, right? And due process, people think due process is equal to justice. They think, oh, I'm going to go into the court system, I'm going to get justice. Very rarely do those things correlate. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. Due process just means checking the necessary boxes to ensure that you get your day in court. And that, in and of itself, is incredibly expensive. Generally speaking, people spend between 40 and 80,000 pre-trial. And then trial is generally another, 35 to 70,000, maybe 100,000, depending on how many days, what's going on. Um, and most people just don't have that kind of money, right? They certainly don't have that kind
Yeah.
of cash flow. And it's, you're talking 1-2% of the population that can afford to do things like that. And so when I was in litigation, I just routinely saw people going bankrupt, or people just closing down their business, or people just
Wow.
giving up, or taking pennies on the dollar to a dispute because they just couldn't afford to keep fighting it. And I see that. I mean, I would say more than 75% of cases, that's the general outcome, because people just don't have that kind of money. And
Yeah.
so going back, to our important legal strategy up front, almost everybody can come up with 10,000 bucks. And almost every business could come up with that over a span of 1 year or 18 months, right? And if you do it right with me, 10,000 will save you 100,000 down the road easily, right? And I was talking with somebody in one of your groups just last week, and the best way that they described it was, I'm a little cost heavy up front, right? To overhaul your structure, to do your contracts, to give you a review, to tell you, here's your areas of risk, here's what you should be doing with your business, here's how you should be doing it. But once you get set up, I am incredibly inexpensive on a yearly maintenance cost. I mean, my small businesses, I start at like 1,200 bucks a year, right? And depending on
Right.
how much you need and what you need going from there, um, it's relatively inexpensive when you're talking about 35 to $70,000 in a dispute.
Yeah. And again, that again, that was one thing I really liked about you when I first talked to you, is that you were so passionate about your goal is to keep away from all the all the
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 nonsense.
yeah, the nonsense of the costs of getting into, like, even if you're right, it can cost you a lot of money, you know what I mean? And so just it's better to take, the time to set things up right, hire someone like you. Yeah. It's like,
Right. And think of it too, like even winning, that's just half the battle. Then there's collections, right? Most
yep.
people think when I get a lawsuit, right, if I win, I get a judgment, they're going to pay me money. And I say, no, no. A judgment is just a piece of paper that entitles you to money, right? Going and collecting that money is a totally separate process from the lawsuit. It's generally it's more of a lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
So after that, I've got to file writs, and I've got to have the sheriff go out and see if
Yep.
they've got any money, and I've got to seize assets, or I've got to do debtors exams, and I've got to find out if they have any money, if they work for somebody, right? And what a lot of times what happens is I'll get a judgment and I'll get a wage garnishment, but these people are so strapped, financially, that they just don't have anything, and so the law only allows me to get 25%, right, on a good day,
Yep.
but it
Yep.
could be less than that if they have more exemptions, and so
Yep.
I might get 50 bucks a month. And on a 30
Yep.
or 40 or 80 or $100,000
Yep.
judgment at 12% interest, that garnishment is rarely even covering the interest. And they've spent probably another 20,000 to go through that collections process in order to get that garnishment. And so it's just rarely ever worth the coin, in my opinion. Now, there are cases where litigation is worthwhile if you're litigating, hundreds of thousands or millions of
Right.
dollars.
Right.
Injunctions, those are popular. If somebody's doing something that's harming your business and you want them to stop, right? Injunctions, those are necessary. It's not to say that all litigation is bad. It's just that in most cases, probably 90%, it could be avoided with a little bit of
Right.
planning up front.
That's awesome. So if we'll kind of wrap this up here. So if there was one piece of legal advice, someone listen to this today, they're a business owner, what's one piece of advice, you give them today after all they've heard?
Yeah, start a relationship today. It doesn't have to be me, right?
Okay.
Just start a relationship. Um, Go find an attorney that you like, that you can stand to be around for a while. I know that might be challenging, but Go find someone you like, invite them to coffee, go play golf, do something, right? And just see if they've got your best interest at heart. Just see, what can they do for you? What do they offer? Um, how can they help make you money, right? Because what I tell people is, listen, if I make you money, I make money. That's good.
Right.
I want
Right.
you to
Right.
have money because then you have money to pay me,
Right.
right? I don't want you to come here telling me that you're owed a sum of money that you don't have and that you absolutely need to keep standing because I know how that's going to work out. Right. But if I can do things that help you make money and stay protected, then that makes me money. And if they go find an attorney that, that's friends, with them. I mean, I've met a lot of attorneys in the Valley and a lot of them are nice people. They're great. I've met very few that I would tell people to stay away from.
Right. Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah, it is. It's like anything. It's like we talked about when you first start a business, just do the steps to protect yourself. So, and
Yeah.
hire some professionals like you to do that. So this has been great. I love it. Like I said, I like the fact also too, as an attorney, you're just such a easy person to talk to.
Comes with the profession, the
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. Hey, well, I really appreciate you being on today. Hey, so how would be the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Email is the best way. I
Okay.
always get emails. I get them to all my devices. I'm not
Okay.
always in my office for phone calls.
Okay.
So email is the best way.
Perfect. And I'll have that in the show notes for everybody. So, hey, I want to
Great.
thank you for coming on today. Uh, this has been another episode of Treasure Valley NA Quick Tips. And I'm sure the listeners will get some knowledge out of this and maybe even reach out to Taylor. So, hey, thanks a lot, Taylor, for being on.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.